You're listening to the Telltale Podcast. Don't forget to check me out on all social media, on Patreon, on Teespring, and on Etsy. All links can be found on my website, telltaleatheist.com, or in the podcast's description. So I was taking a look at this article. The title of it is, "It's Good That the United Methodist Church is Breaking Up Over Anti-LGBTQ Hate." Let me give you guys just a little bit of background on this situation, because some of you may be unaware of what happened with it. A while back, the United Methodist Church, or the Methodist General Conference, voted on this initiative, whether or not they're going to allow gay people to be pastors. This is on the Friendly Atheist blog. This is by Hemant Mehta, so let's give it a look, give it a read, and see what it has to say. The United Methodist Church, the second largest Protestant denomination in the United States, with more than 12 million members, looks like it will soon split up over the question of whether or not to embrace bigotry. It's the right move. Some relationships need to end in divorce. The entire controversy stemmed from the question of whether individual UMC churches should be allowed to ordain LGBTQ members as ministers and perform same-sex marriages. While the majority of UMC churches in the United States supported that a la carte option, many in other parts of the world actively opposed that idea. Last year, 53% of the UMC delegates voted on a plan that basically rejected LGBTQ inclusion for everyone formally affiliated with the church. I remember when this happened, I was really disappointed because if I identified as any religion, which I don't, I am an atheist. I don't believe in any religion at this moment. I think it's all completely ludicrous. But if I did, I would say it would be Methodist because, for one thing, in my experience, they haven't been very extreme. This is one of the groups that I tout as being moderate generally, not extreme, as not being a cult. I always cite them when somebody says, name one religion that's not a cult. I say Methodists, Lutherans, and some others. So the fact that they voted on this really, really disappointed me. I'm interested to see this split in the church. Honestly, splits in churches have always fascinated me. Like, just look back to the Millerite movement in the mid-1800s when they split up. They split and kind of formed like a bunch of different sects. And from those sects, Jehovah's Witnesses were born, Seventh-day Adventists were born. Just a ton of different groups sprung up from that. So I'm always fascinated to see when a group splits up, to see where it goes from there. Okay, let's continue reading this. That meant pro-inclusion churches were going to have to make a decision, accept the new rules and say goodbye to LGBTQ leaders in relationships and those who wanted to perform same-sex unions, along with all those younger people who would never voluntarily join such a bigoted denomination, or make a break and try to run a church with no support from a larger body. That latter option would have been difficult for many churches that rely on the financial help from the UMC. Very true. Today, however, a new proposal was put forth by UMC leaders. The Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation would effectively create a traditionalist Methodist denomination for the bigots and seed it with $25 million over 4 years because they're family, and I guess you can't let them go without a peace offering. The flip side of that is that pro-inclusion churches can remain within the UMC fold and continue supporting LGBTQ members. That's even more fascinating. The fact that the I don't like using the word bigots in this case because bigotry, racism means discrimination against somebody based on their race or their ethnicity or whatever, right? Sexism means discrimination based on sex. Bigotry means discrimination based on opinions. I don't think that this is over opinions. I think that this is homophobia, not bigotry. So I would say the homophobes probably would be more apt. It says, a new proposal was put forth by UMC leaders. The Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation would effectively create a traditionalist Methodist denomination for the homophobes and seed it with $25 million over 4 years. So that's extremely fascinating to me because that tells me that the homophobes were the problem that was too small. It tells me that the reasonable people who wanted to be more inclusive outnumbered the homophobes, even though the vote went that direction anyways. That's extremely interesting to me that it played out the way it did. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on the money. They're seeding them with $25 million over 4 years. I'm really not a huge fan of that, but at least the split's happening. I can be happy that the split's happening, I guess. The flip side of that is that pro-inclusion churches can remain with the UMC fold and continue supporting LGBTQ members. This is a quote. Friday's announcement came as new sanctions were set to go into effect in the church, which would have made punishments for UMC pastors who perform same-sex weddings much more severe. 1 year's suspension without pay for the first wedding and removal from the clergy for any wedding after that. Instead, leaders from liberal and conservative wings signed an agreement saying they will postpone those sanctions and instead vote to split at the Worldwide Church's May General Conference. That's a bit of good news, I would say, right? I'm so glad that this split is happening. I'm really, really happy about that. In addition to breaking away from the more inclusive UMC, the homophobes promise not to fight over UMC assets. In other words, this won't be a messy divorce. Both sides are getting what they want. They're pledging not to fight over custody. It's pretty much the best thing everyone could have hoped for. There's still some work to do, though. Even after the homophobes leave, the UMC's official position remains anti-LGBTQ. That's a shame. And members will have to undo that. Some leaders say just getting rid of those rules, however, won't fix the innate anti-LGBTQ culture within the church or its reckoning with history. That's true. But small steps, you know? Small steps. We're making progress. We're moving in the right direction, and I'm really glad to hear about that one. There are efforts in the protocol to stop condemnation of LGBTQ people, which of course is good. There are no signs pointing toward a church that affirms us and repents of the significant harm that has been done to the LGBTQIA people for decades because of its complicity in spiritual violence against us, said M. Barclay, who was ordained in 2017 as the United Methodist Church's first transgender deacon. Fascinating. See, what other sect of Christianity would you find a transgender deacon? I can't imagine that happening in a Southern Baptist church. I mean, that just goes to show you that Methodists have historically been a little bit more progressive, or are currently more progressive than a lot of other branches, and that's a good sign. I want to see other denominations move that direction. Pretty much lost hope for Jehovah's Witnesses. Pretty much lost hope for Mormonism. Not happening. But at least it's working in one of them. At least it's working in one sect, in one split of one sect, of one denomination, of one religion. It's working. So, baby steps.